All right. Welcome to SMarketPlace, Sales Marketing and Rock and Roll. It's Thursday, November 20th. We're getting ready to go into the last lap of the year here. I can't believe it. Welcome. I got a great guest today, André Archimbaud and Tom Dempsey. Welcome.
All right, good to see you, Keith.
Same,
Andre,
Hey,
same.
good to see
everybody.
you. Yeah.
Andre, we've
Great to
talked
be here.
about this.
Thank you so much.
We've talked about this for a long time, and
We have.
I think this is going to be great. We share not only a love of photography, which you're sharing some of on the background, but also a love of music. And so this, I think, is going to be a great episode. Tom, since we last spoke, I saw us a couple weeks ago at the Paramount Theater in Denver.
Who? Oh, you saw Yes.
I saw Yes. Yes, I
Yeah.
did.
Was that just
Uh,
a great experience?
It was cool. It was very low key, very baby boomer audience
Right.
in a small theater. But
Wow.
yeah, they sounded terrific. I mean, I saw them in '78. I touched Rick Wakeman when he came into the theater in the round at Chicago Stadium, and was we took a limousine to see them. I mean, we were total yacht rock wannabes in the '70s, and so to see them so many years later was really great. All new lineup except the guitarist, um, drawing a blank, Squire. Is it Chris Squire?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was like he had power over the crowd. Very low key, gray ponytail, and just a few movements, and he got the crowd to respond without being loud and rock and rolly. So just one of the intellectual powerhouses of '70s prog rock.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure.
All right. Good for
Yeah.
you.
Anything on your
Fantastic.
agenda?
I've been fairly dormant lately in terms of music. I'm sure I'll go to a punk show or something with my daughter in the next few weeks. She drags me along to all those, and that, I mean, the ones that, which is funny to me, that I would see back in my teenage years and 20s. So it's fun to see aging rockers still doing it. Did get ACDC tickets.
So, Andre, we'll let you introduce yourself here, but you got any shows that you've seen or have on
Well,
the
it's funny. I
agenda?
was going to comment on the aging rockers. I went to see one of my musical heroes is a guy named Bob Mould, who
Oh
was
yeah.
the primary lead singer and songwriter for Husker Du and the band Sugar, who
Hmm.
are also sort of in a revitalized state of things. But I saw Bob solo electric about 2 months ago. That's the last kind of like ticketed gig that I went to here in New York at Le Poisson Rouge. With a name like Archimbaud, I have to pronounce Le Poisson Rouge properly. Um, but Bob, that was mid to late September, I want to say, and about a month later, he turned 65. And I think, Keith, I might have sent you the video, or maybe you saw some. The guy does not, other than the fact that he's got a white beard like me, he does not carry himself like he's 65 at all. Still bounding around the stage, and again, that was even solo electric. So, imagine if he had drums and bass behind him, like he oftentimes does.
Yeah,
So,
I just saw Husker Du video recently. They're still, you know, impacting.
yeah, no, it's fine. I think part of it is that they just put a box set out called The Miracle Year. It focuses on 1985. I bought it. I read the liner notes a few weekends ago, and it really was kind of a miracle year. The end of that year had them signing to a major label, coming out of the indie, rock, you know, uh, DIY sort of world that they helped to create. in a great
Yeah.
many ways.
That was
With things like Black Flag, etc.
that was the year I came out of college. Had been producing shows on campus
Oh
for
yeah, I know we've discussed a little bit about that over the years.
and they were big. I think we tried to get them and just couldn't make it work. We had the kind of auditorium where, it was bands either on their way up or on their way down, and if they
Sure.
were on their way up, they were trying to squeeze Carbondale, Illinois into something between Chicago and St. Louis.
Right. Sure. Now that makes sense.
Yeah.
But
Well, tell
yeah,
us a little bit about yourself before we get too
thank you.
far down
Yeah.
the
So,
rabbit hole.
it's funny that we would launch into music the way we did. I mean, I got into college with the idea of being an audio engineer, and did that actually for 10 years, less so in music, but more so in broadcast production. Spent the first 10 years of my career predominantly in network news, NPR, CBS, the Christian Science Monitor when they still had a radio network, and then which was very, very similar to NPR. And then I made the move over into media sales, marketing, and advertising a little over 20 years ago, and haven't really looked back. Funnily enough, I sold radio for about 2 years, then moved into digital, and I've been in digital ever since. But I still sort of touch on traditional media now and again, and the core. And so I've launched my own company in the last 6-8 months or so, called Clearly Now Media, which also has its roots in music in terms of the great Johnny Nash song, I Can See Clearly Now, and
Hmm.
and a few covers. There's a much longer story that's better told over cocktails, related to that song and the impact it's had on my life and the presence in my life. So it was fitting that I would sort of christen the thing as such, within the last year. But at the end of the
So what are
day,
you trying to do with Clearly Now?
sorry, say it again.
What are you trying to do with Clearly Now?
Yeah, so I
What's your
mean, it's
focus?
it's half of the business is pure play digital advertising. Running paid search, paid social campaigns, doing some SEO as well, and then conversely, the other side of the business is kind of a bit of a playscape, as I like to call it. Dabbling in music here and there, consulting with clients and folks about best practices in terms of maybe their content, etc. I've just this is a little early because the official release will go out next week, but I'm in the process of launching a partnership with Liftoff Enterprises, which is Jeannie Walden's brand, to help her sort of shape and scope some of the sponsored content in particular that and for those who don't know, Jeannie is I would qualify her as the rock star CMO. Jeannie and I have been connected for over a decade, but we reconnected recently, and this is kind of an object lesson in a bunch of things. But showing up, she and I reconnected at a Brand Innovators event here in New York about 2 months ago, and we got to chatting about through a mutual friend, a very dear friend of mine, Ted Rubin, and she had a need in terms of trying to sort of shape things in terms of her branded content and distribution, and it's like I said, it's early, but the thrust of it is that we're gonna have coverage her content in about 80 million homes around America, online, offline, podcast, through the Leap Media Group in particular. So it like I say, this is we're literally formulating it as we speak. But given the relationship you and I have had, Keith, over the years, I figured I would bring an early exclusive here.
There you go. You heard it
You,
here on SmarketPlace.
Exactly.
Well,
you,
good luck with that.
Thank you very much.
one of the things that really impresses me, Andre, is you have a great breadth of clients that you've had over the years, university and healthcare and wellness brands, tech startups, that sort of thing.
Sure.
Do you have a sort of a reproducible creative process that may be an oxymoron, but you deal with so much diversity and each has a very different brand and message? But when you and your team start to mull through, okay, what are we going to do and how are we going to do it? Is there a process you go through?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can overcomplicate things at times. You know, the reality is that it comes down to the goals and how we're going to reach those goals with the client. What kind of for example, I gave a talk at a B2B event about a week ago here in New York. And we talked about the fact that, in B2B, the goals are completely different. The sales cycle is completely different. Typically the budgets are very, very different because you're dealing with instead of widgets, you're dealing with, hundreds of thousands of dollars in software or hardware or whatever it may be. So you have to kind of navigate through that. But at the end of the day, it's a matter of unifying and aligning around what those goals are and how are we going to get to those goals.
Mm. Yeah.
And you've got some interesting thoughts around media and marketing and just how they're almost like parallel, synonymous, very gray area.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not a hard edge.
Yeah, one of the things that I said in the talk last week was rooted in the idea that the buying funnel, the sales funnel, isn't really a funnel anymore. It's more, and in fact, my compadre on the day is a longtime buddy of mine who's at Verizon at the moment, and I had never heard the term the enterprise maze per se, because only about 20% of my business has been B2B. But the idea of the enterprise maze sort of reinforced something I've been saying for 7 to 10 years. It's not a funnel anymore. It's this dynamic sort of, ever-changing landscape. It sort of reminds me of that film, the title of the film, maybe not the film and content, but the title of the film, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Because the reality is that our audiences are everywhere. And they consume everything. The only time we're really not consuming something when our eyes are closed, when we're sleeping. And the devices that we use, most notably our phones, let's be honest, allow for such portability of that media that we're never really disconnected anymore, unless you're sitting and reading a book, an analog book. With paper.
And that's something that I'm actually trying to get back into. I've gone away from reading over the last few years, and I actually have two sitting next to my bed that I'm forcing myself to pick up.
Sure.
One of them's Kevin Perlmutter's book on branding. I've been slogging through that, and that's just super fascinating.
Very cool.
Your idea of everything everywhere all at once, it's like the infinity loop for marketing, and yet at the same time we can micro target. Talk a little bit about how you target and get to very narrow slices.
Oh yeah, I mean, these days you literally can target one side of the block and not the other on the B2C side. On the B2B side, there's a million ways to get into, what had been sort of impenetrable. I wouldn't even call them walled gardens. I mean, they were, places like doctors' offices or universities or whatever. You can get in there because of the amount of data that's out in the marketplace anymore. And so, the ability to be able to drill into that, whether it's first-party data that the client owns or whether they're buying third-party data, which I don't love, but it's a thing. One of the things that I say to my clients all the time is the more first-party data you have, the better off you'll be in terms of, long-term scope and scale. So to me, that access to data is what allows, this as a HubSpot wizard, all of that data has to live somewhere, and having it is one thing. I'm working with a client right now here in New York, local client with a potentially national presence, and the amount of data she has is really pretty strong, but she hasn't segmented it. There's a ton of stuff that we're going to start doing the work on, because it matters. Simple as that.
You've got to be able to use the data. And I mean, that's what we love about HubSpot is it's migrated to the idea of not just your CRM where you're keeping track of conversations, but it's your revenue operations. It's from the media spend on your side to the conversion to a sale and the revenue that is attributable to that, all the way
Sure.
through to sending out an invoice. So, and we're
Yeah.
now, speaking of data, working with another company called Viva that has an AI-based outreach. So similar to Sales Navigator on LinkedIn, it
Yeah.
will allow you to pick and the segments and build a list, but then it actually does the outreach. It sends out the
Right.
email from you trying to set an
Sure.
appointment. And so I think all of those non-value adding things, like doing outreach and sending out emails to people that you met at a conference, can be automated now and give you more
Yeah.
time to do the thinking stuff.
Yeah. No, it's very true. Um, I have a fairly seasoned lens on AI writ large, and Keith, I feel like you and I have discussed this before. Largely speaking, so none of this is new. None of the tech is new. Some of the delivery around the tech is new for sure, around LLMs, etc. Particularly, but the idea of automation, which at the core of it is really what AI is, and we've had versions of AI for 30 years. Just they've not been
Right.
public facing necessarily. They've not been anyway. Um, Given the sort of scope and scale of AI, and again writ large, there are times where I say to myself, I wish AI stood for actual intelligence instead of artificial intelligence. But at the same time, the tools are endlessly powerful. The ability to automate a lot of those things, endlessly powerful. And even in my own practice, and for the last, well, what is it? Is it almost 4 years since ChatGPT came out public?
Yeah.
Three or four. Um, I more than dabble in 3 or 4 of the platforms. So I'm aware of the strengths, the weaknesses, some of the things that I
There you
like,
go.
some of the things that I still don't like. But at the end of the day, because two things, I've always been an early adopter on everything. And I mean everything. I'm user 740,000 on Twitter. Not that matters or means anything 18 years later, almost 19.
But considering there's tens of millions of people,
Yeah.
that says something.
Yeah. No, and which is part of the reason why I really wish AI sometimes stood for actual intelligence.
Well, there's a big conversation in the podcastosphere, if you want to have, I listen to a lot about AI, try and get a handle on it from a market and a personal use standpoint. And
Sure.
it does dumb us down. If you just take
Yeah.
it right out of the box, what it gives you and use it, it's going to sound like everyone else. But
Yeah. Yeah.
if you see it as a way to increase your variety, to find innovation, to have ideas that you weren't going to have on your own,
Yeah.
to shorten the time frame on things, but you got to do the work yourself.
Yeah. No, and I mean, the equivalent would be somebody coming to you looking for, a lot of heavy lifting related to HubSpot, for example, and then, expecting that to happen in a 48-hour window.
Mhm.
It's going to take some time to get that right, iteration in place.
One thing that Keith and I have talked about so many times, and really this was probably our first conversation, was about how sales and marketing work together
Right.
seamlessly. And in an ideal scenario, they're not two separate silos. They're actually one in many ways. But the question
band.
is, from a marketing standpoint and media more specifically with you, how do you walk your customers through ROI discussion? Hey, if we're going to spend this amount of money, what's going to be our return? How are we going to quantify that? How does that how do you deal with that?
For me, it really comes down to what are the margins, what's the budget, what's the typical, sort of conversion time, path to cash, so to speak. Walking them through that, and then saying if your average, customer acquisition, timeline is 2 weeks, and again, we're talking speaking widgets here, and the average transaction value is 50, but we've not used any real framework for math here, obviously, but let's say it's a $5,000 budget, on whatever it is, paid search, for example. If the net revenue is $50, we've got to sell 1,000 of the widgets to be able to break even. And then you look at past performance, and try to map that to see, what that looks like, if that's a reasonable, expected outcome. It's part of the reason that I've enjoyed over the years working with colleges, universities, healthcare systems, is the fact that the two things, maybe even two and a half or three things. The first is that the budgets tend to be a little bit more robust, but more importantly, the transaction value is much more robust. For a college, for the average, 4-year private institution, an MBA is on the low side, 50 grand. Right. And on the high side, you could be in the several $100,000. So even if you're in the cost per click of, 7 to 10 to 20 to $50, assuming you get enough of that traffic, and you've got optimized pages, and you've got funnels that people are coming through, you should have a pretty good set of outcomes. And the same as, and the lifetime value, the budget, the lifetime value, and then the transaction value all sort of are in alignment.
Right.
Where it can get challenging is, when you're talking about widgets, when you're talking about, earlier today I was watching a video, and it was a video with, oh gosh, it was a deodorant, and I couldn't tell if it was really random or but it was a YouTube spot, and they were talking. It was guerrilla video where they were shooting video on like the subway or the bus or something. The guy asked the woman in the thing, saying, "Hey, what's your experience with deodorant?" And one of the things we haven't touched on at all is creative. In a scenario like that, the creative does help to push the brand forward and probably help to, scale all of that. But at the same time, they've got to sell a lot of deodorant, because chances are that at best is maybe a $10 item at best, or
Right.
worse, depending on, who the market is. And so in a scenario like that, you've got to sell a lot of deodorant to make up I'm guessing the CPM on that is probably, $10 to $12. that you're reaching 1,000. You know what I mean? So you got to sell a lot of deodorant.
Well, that's really interesting. We have an ROI calculator on our website that helps you sort through exactly that, right? So
There
you
you
have a
go.
marketing budget on tab one, and then your channels for sales, one of which could be the ad campaign that you're talking about, and then how many leads do you need to generate the purchases.
Sure.
And when you're in a retail, it's even one level of abstraction more. If it's a direct order
Right.
deodorant, well, at least you have the incoming traffic to be able to associate with the
Sure.
ad and see what your performance is. But it's half magic and black arts and half science. But the
Yeah.
science gives you a field of vision to know what your risk is.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's very true. And, one of the things that I say to people all the time is that the best planning tools, the estimators that are out there, any and all of that stuff, they're good guide rails or guardrails or guideposts. I'm mixing my metaphors. Is that okay? But they're good guideposts. But at the end of the day, you'll never know a thing about the campaign until it goes live.
That's right.
Until it goes live, and I had a boss several years ago who said it's it's all a rumor until the check clears. You know what I mean? And there's some truth to that. Until a campaign is out in the market, one way, wherever that market is, whether it's connected TV, whether it's YouTube, whether it's paid search, whatever it is, it doesn't, it's rumor.
Yep.
And guesswork, really.
But experience gives us I think a lot of people who aren't marketers are hesitant on the worst case scenario and don't see the full spectrum of outcomes.
Yeah,
And experience gives us if it's a very high-end product like you described, like an MBA for $200,000,
sure,
you don't need a lot of clicks and you don't need a lot of sales to pay
sure.
for that CPM.
Yeah,
On the other hand, I've had an executive, after I laid out this huge marketing plan and then put sort of the summary ROI calculator there, he's like, wait, I need to get 2 sales and this thing's paid for, and after that, everything goes right to the bottom line. I'm like, that's the economics.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So,
It to change topics a little bit, back to you. Um, you've done a lot, and I mean that as a compliment.
Yeah, sure.
Of
I've had
course,
a varied career.
you've had a great career. You've pivoted a lot, but is there a common theme through all the positions that you've had, or are there just totally unique experiences from one to the next?
Yeah, they are. It's funny. I shared a few years ago on Instagram a photo of me staring. I was probably 3 or 4 years old, staring at a television in our house in Ringwood, New Jersey, right? And couldn't tell you what's on. You can't tell from that angle. And as great as my memory is, I couldn't tell you what was on TV that night 50 years ago. But that touch point of media has always been the most important thing to me, the leading thing. What I would say is that, like, when I was in college, when I was in high school, I was very involved in the theater department because it was kind of like I thought I wanted to be a filmmaker. And at the end of the day, that was the closest thing that I could do to that. And then I migrated, when I went off to college, I fell into the college radio station, which is a story I know Keith I think has a similar background. I fell into the college radio station and was, over the moon for the next 4 years. And then when I got out of school, it was, what do I have to do to figure out a career in media? Part of the reason I didn't stay in music production was that it was changing greatly at that point. It went from being where you needed large rooms and a lot of gear to being able to produce these things on laptops, desktops, phones in some cases,
Yeah.
Um, what I would say that the common through line is staying engaged in the media business is the first thing, and then staying around it. The years that I spent in production, the I enjoy that creative process, and then on the flip side, you know, um, figuring out the best way to market, a concept, a product, whatever it may be, is to me almost as creative, in some cases more so,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. So it's
Yeah.
always been about staying around the media business and trying to be nimble, especially in this day and age. The reality is that, when I was a little kid, I was probably the only 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old who knew who Brandon Tartikoff was, the head of NBC, right? And yeah, I said this to a buddy of mine about 2 months ago, who eventually ended up helping to run MTV and Viacom. The reality is that media companies they're in our pockets now. You don't need the antennas. You don't need, I mean, you have the creator economy, where people are making hundreds, if not millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars every month because of the content they're creating.
You raise
Yeah.
a really interesting point because, I was on the end of the era. My stepdad did global stuff for
Right.
an international company, and moved markets, and on the stock, moved the price of stock by timing announcements, and not
Sure.
not to play the market, but to legitimately run a public company. And
Yeah.
and so now we're in this creator economy where we don't have that huge impact, but there's still demand for these services that Mad Men had in the 60s and 70s.
Sure. No, 1,000%, 1,000%. Yeah, it's just morphed. It's changed. Um, it's and I even said to somebody recently, I think the old school holding company business is in an interesting place at the moment, because the creatives for years have shifted. They've gone from account to account. So if Charmin bath tissue went, and it's always, that piece has always been strange to me. But it's if Charmin was at WPP and moved over to Omnicom, they would move the team. It's like, well, why? What was the? And I think at the end of the day, it came down to the math behind it. Margins and deliverables, maybe. So, if you're just moving the brand and the team from one agency to the next, I also think that's a lot of the reason why a lot of brands are moving stuff in house, frankly.
Mhm.
Big movement to the in-house agency. Well, all
Yeah.
right, I'm going to switch gears because we're going to run out of time, but
Yeah.
you are a walking encyclopedia of music. I don't, I told Tom a little bit, but I don't think I could explain how much uh, history you have and knowledge you have about rock and roll and jazz. So tell us a little bit about your early rock and roll experiences and how that's, driven the way you look at the world today.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I had a prospective client meeting yesterday, and one of the things that we made a point of touching on, in fact, and even in the subsequent texts and emails in the last 24 hours, we've talked about different favorite shows and different acts and whatever. And I think it comes down to a relational thing. If you can convey how great this show was, or that show was, or this song, that song, that kind of thing. But I mean, it started very, very young. I mean, at the youngest, going back to that story about what, staring into the TV at age 3 or 4, I did the same thing with the headphones. So, it probably sounds egotistical or cocky, but I don't mean it that way. I've probably forgotten more about music and baseball. We really haven't talked about the baseball stuff here today, but than most people know. And again, it's not meant to sound egotistical. It's just that, I've read the books, I've read the liner notes, I've worked in some of the studios. I know some of the people who made some of those records in some cases, so I feel like there's some authority there, but I thought about it recently that, like, I live a lot of my life with like one one foot really close to the third rail. For folks who don't live in urban areas with subways and similar, the third rail is where electricity passes to get the train in and out, keep the train system up. I like being that close to the energy, and that to me is what music is, and really great entertainment in general.
Yeah.
A lot
That's
of the
wild.
that's so interesting. A lot of the people that are on the show, when we get to this section, wax back poetically to their first album, and I love how you've connected it to the energy and being part of the rock and roll scene,
Sure.
as opposed to the emotional side. That's really a fascinating take on the industry.
So it was funny that the talk I gave last week at the B2B conference was they opened with, "What's your favorite record that has no skips?" And I've got about 20 of those, maybe more. But I wanted to keep it generic because I didn't want to seem super esoteric, because most of those choices of mine are esoteric. So I came out with U2's The Joshua Tree, and there's nothing pedestrian about that record, especially if you know anything about the history and the making of it and the band and some of the backstory. As I said to my new friend yesterday, U2 was the gateway drug for me in a great many ways. But they, it's a need to keep that stuff close, and revive that feeling. I'm always chasing that high. That's the closest thing I'll ever be able to convey around, how addicts might behave.
Well, so what was the first music that gave you that jolt that you
Oh
remember?
boy. Actually, I do. It was Meatloaf's "Bat Out of Hell" at like age 4. Dancing around the living room with the headphones on, the big clunky meat hook headphones from Radio Shack. And then at around the same time, the Broadway show Evita came out, and that has a lot of the same vibe to it. Believe it or not, you wouldn't think that, but it does.
The energy.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. Listening to vinyl, I still do the same.
Oh yeah. It's funny, when we were picking backgrounds, I for a long time I had, when the pandemic kicked off, my background was my vinyl collection. It's about 1,000 strong.
All right.
I think I remember that.
Yeah.
All the records in your background. I do. I remember.
Yeah. Having moved from the Upper West Side to Jersey City in the last 2 years, I've shaped that up a little bit. It's no longer behind me, but I guess I could drag that background out again.
So what kind of shows are you seeing these days?
I did actually book a pair to see the band Sugar, Bob Mould's remounted band. Trying to think of what else. I'm also one for a great singer-songwriter, in a quiet, little bar. I'm great, despite my very French name. I'm very connected to my Irish heritage on my mother's side. So I think we're going to try to head to see a trad session this weekend, something like that. So, I'm not a whole lot. I'm not one to pre-buy a ton. But I keep my eyes and ears open, and I'll stumble into shows sometimes where it's like I didn't know that this was happening, and that'll light up that electricity.
Isn't that one of the wonderful things about New York, New Jersey, that area is everybody comes through there, right, from
Yeah.
a musical standpoint. And I can't tell you how many times I've been there on business over the years and have a night free or whatever it happens to be. That's the first thing I do. We'll look and see who's playing. And I've seen some amazing shows. Just me. It's easier to get a ticket that way too.
Very recently, I had a conversation with a text conversation with a dear friend, and she just moved back to New York within the last 6 months after being away for 7 to 10 years, give or take. And I said, part of the reason that I've never really left the area is the fact that, twofold. Everybody comes through here, everybody, and when they do, they almost always bring their A game. And it's
you
really,
can't
really rare. Yeah, because they know the stakes are high. Unlike other aspects of media and entertainment, music is different, and I think it really comes down to the live thing, really.
That's a great point. The live music and the energy of the crowd and how that inspires and the artist feeds back off of that makes all the difference.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Very much. Very much. And most people who come here are looking, to your point, if they're in from out of town, they're expecting, I mean, there are choices here. You do have Broadway, you do have off Broadway, you have venues, you've got venues up and down, the tri-state area that you can go to. And on any given night, you can see somebody who's going to blow your socks off.
Yeah. Speaking of people coming through town, somebody really special came through, and that was Paul McCartney. Came out. He's been on tour.
Oh, sure.
And
yeah,
what I thought, back to that feeding off the audience, was he really managed that crowd.
Still.
It had to be 20,000, 15, 20,000 people.
Sure.
And it was intimate. Some of it was stories I'm sure that he's told in every town he went through, but several of them were about his visits over the years to Denver. So
yeah, it's funny. I'm not normally one to no one wants to hear me clacking through the internet, but just because it was so good, I'm gonna do that. 2 or 3 years ago, it might have started longer ago, but I discovered the podcast by Paul Muldoon with Paul McCartney. I can't more highly recommend that. I think they did 2 seasons. I want to say it's a total of about 20 episodes, but each individual episode is sort of how that song came to be. And Paul Muldoon, if you don't know, is I may be speaking out of turn, but he's kind of like a poet laureate of Ireland. And the way the two of them connected together, but then also in conveying and conferring around McCartney's material. Really impressive. If you don't know that show, highly recommend.
Well, and what was the name?
It is called A Life in Lyrics. McCartney, A Life in Lyrics, and they like I said, I want to say it's about 20, maybe 30 episodes that look at one song a piece.
Well, I was very impressed. I kind of saw it as like a checkbox. I never saw the Beatles. This was about as close as I'll ever get.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, very much so.
Right? Winding down on time.
I saw him in Brooklyn about 10 years ago, and it was similar sort of a thing. Very, very similar vibe for me.
Yeah, well, it was very well done, and you can see why the Beatles did what they did with somebody who's able to take a crowd of 20,000 people and just bring it down to a very intimate
Yeah.
conversation. It was,
No, very much. Very much.
anything on your radar that you're going to see coming up?
Not immediately. Like I said, the only thing I booked, part of the reason I booked the sugar thing so early is the fact that, and I normally am not one for that. Actually, I'll say this. I'm normally not one for that, but I knew that that band has not been together in 30 years. And so the idea that they're getting back together for a limited run of shows, I think it's 3 shows in New York, 2 in London, and they put out a new single, is pretty phenomenal. Related, Bob Mold's usual bassist for the last 25 years, 20 years, he's going on tour and doing like it's not right to call it an REM cover band because that carries a different attachment to it that it doesn't. Jason Narducci and Michael Shannon and a series of other super talented musicians, including John Sturrock. I hope I'm pronouncing his last name right. John played for years with, oh God, Jeff Tweedy's band. It just flew out of my head. Wilco. He was the bassist in Wilco for, I think, most of, and may still even be. Those 5 or 6 guys are going to be doing what they do is that they do a new album, not a new, but they did Murmur, they did Reckoning. Next year is Life's Rich Pageant. If you're any kind of an REM fan, it's the closest thing you'll get to seeing REM again with Jason Narducci and Michael Shannon. That I think starts in mid-February. So those are the only 2 shows that I've pre-booked.
Have to check that out. I'm a big REM fan. They came to, speaking of, getting started in the business, they came over and partied after the show.
Oh, no, I think you told me about that.
College.
Yeah.
That was like one of my highlights. Stevie Ray Vaughan and REM.
Oh, wow. Very cool. Very cool.
So,
and
well,
first.
this I could sit here and talk
We
forever.
could do this all day.
Yeah.
Clearly.
We'll have to have you back on.
Yeah, would love that. Really enjoyed this, guys. Great time, and look forward to keeping up conversations as we go.
Absolutely. Thanks, Andre. Really enjoyed it, and Keith hears this a lot, but there are guests that we learn a great deal from, and we have learned a lot from you today. I have, certainly, and we appreciate you coming on.
Brilliant. Thanks again, guys.
Thanks, and everybody will be sharing clips from this, primarily on LinkedIn, but on our other channels, and we look forward to having you visit us again. Thanks for joining us.